Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren, und herzlich willkommen zurück. Das ist die 13. Lektion in unserer Reise durch die deutsche Sprache. As I mentioned at the conclusion of our last lesson, this lesson marks a new stage in our journey, die dritte Etappe. In this dritte Etappe, we're going to add the following skill sets to our language repertoire. We're going to learn how to talk about events in the past, how to formulate sentences with verbs that have a separable prefix, how to use subordinating conjunctions to combine dependent and independent clauses, and we're going to learn how to express the indirect object in a sentence using a grammatical case called the dative. As you can see, die dritte Etappe has a lot in store for us. Are you ready? Großartig! Los geht's! Heute beginnen wir mit dem Thema Da-Compounds und Wo-Compounds. Wie bitte? What's that, you ask? What are Da and Wo-Compounds? Well, the short answer is Da und Wo-Compounds are words made up of a Da or a Wo plus a preposition. For instance, da plus für, dafür. Da plus gegen, dagegen. Da plus hin, dahin. The same goes for wo compounds. Wo plus für, wofür. Wo plus gegen, wogegen. Und wo plus hin, wohin. As you can see, wo compounds generally initiate a question, like, wohin gehst du? Wofür bist du? Whereas da compounds are used in statements. Ich gehe dahin. Ich bin dafür. What's more, a da compound can't just be used all by itself. Da compounds are context dependent. We just can't walk up to someone and announce, ich bin dagegen. The other person would probably give us a weird look and say, wie bitte? Wogegen sind Sie? No, a da compound needs something to refer to. And so, to give us a clear idea of how da and wo compounds work in a natural conversation, guess who I've invited back? Ralf und Mia Gruber. And I've asked them to, are you ready for this? I have asked them to talk politics while enjoying the afternoon sun in their family's Schrebergarten. Aber keine Panik. Das Gespräch bleibt höflich und respektvoll. Alles klar? Also dann, Herr und Frau Gruber, bitteschön.
Welche Zeitung liest du da?
Die FAZ.
Ach so. Seit wann abonnieren wir die Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung?
Warum? Was hast du dagegen?
Ich habe nichts dagegen, aber die FAZ ist bekanntlich teuer.
Naja, darum ist sie auch die beste Zeitung.
Woher hast du sie?
Ich habe sie heute Morgen in der Bäckerei gekauft.
Also dann. Was gibt's Neues in der Welt?
Die Bundeskanzlerin macht eine große internationale Reise.
Ist das alles?
Nein, hier steht's. Arnold Schwarzenegger will nächster deutscher Bundeskanzler werden.
Wie bitte?
Ja, und? Bist du für oder gegen ihn?
Du machst wohl Witze, oder?
Natürlich ist das ein Witz. Was denkst du?
Gut. Und der Weltfrieden? Was steht da darüber?
Leider nichts, aber ich bin definitiv dafür.
Vielen Dank, Herr und Frau Gruber. I gotta say, Ralph and Mia did an exceptional job of demonstrating how da and wo compounds are used in conversational exchanges. For instance, when Ralph sees that Mia is reading an expensive newspaper, he asks her, woher hast du denn die Zeitung? The woher is referring to a place. And then, later on, Ralph asks her, und der Weltfrieden? Was steht da darüber? The darüber here refers to a thing, in this case to world peace, der Weltfrieden. On the other hand, when Ralph and Mia's language refers to a person, they don't use a da or a wo compound. Instead, they use a preposition and a personal pronoun. This is what I'm talking about. When Mia is joking with Ralph, she tells him that in the newspaper it says, Arnold Schwarzenegger will nächster deutscher Bundeskanzler werden. Now, at first Ralph can't believe his ears, and he exclaims, wie bitte? But Mia, being the wonderful wife she is, continues the gag, asking Ralph, und bist du für oder gegen ihn? So da and wo compounds are only used to refer to objects, ideas, or places. You don't use them when you're talking about a person. For example, one common phrase with a da compound is, haben Sie etwas dagegen? Now, I've had people say this to me in Germany and Austria with regard to smoking, for instance. I'm standing outside of a restaurant or waiting at a bus stop, and the person next to me takes out a cigarette and a lighter and says to me, haben Sie etwas dagegen? Or, hätten Sie etwas dagegen? On the other hand, as I mentioned just a couple moments ago, when we're talking about a person and we want to refer to that person in a particular context-specific way, we can't use a da or a wo compound. For instance, say that our new friend has bought a new car and we're standing there in their driveway and we're admiring it. We might say, das ist ein schönes Auto. Then we might ask, ist das für deine Tochter? And then our neighbor responds with this, ja, es ist dafür. Now, there's something very, very off about the neighbor's response here. In German, you can't refer to a daughter, that is a person, with the da compound, like dafür. Remember, da compounds only work with things. So instead of dafür, what our neighbor needs to use is the preposition für, followed by a pronoun. In this case, the pronoun would be sie, since it refers to a feminine singular noun in the accusative. So when we ask, ist das Auto für deine Tochter? The neighbor should say, ja, es ist für sie. Alles klar? Now, one more thing that we need to add about wo and da compounds before we move on to our next grammar topic is this. When we ask a question in which a preposition refers to someone and not something or some place, the German language requires that we start our question with the preposition, and then follow that preposition right away with the accusative interrogative pronoun wen. For example, we would not ask someone, wofür bist du, or worüber sprechen Sie, if we're referring to a person. Instead, we would ask, für wen bist du, and über wen sprechen Sie. Let's look back one last time at the Gruber's dialogue. Recall that Mia plays that trick on Ralph, telling him that she's read in the newspaper, Arnold Schwarzenegger will nächster deutscher Bundeskanzler sein. To which Ralph responds, wie bitte? Prompting Mia to ask, und bist du für oder gegen ihn? But imagine this. Let's say that we just walked in on their conversation, right at the moment when Mia asks, bist du für oder gegen ihn? Now, because we missed the context, which was established in the previous sentences, we don't know who Mia is talking about. But, well, now we're curious. Now we do want to know who they're talking about. And so we ask, gegen wen bist du? Or, für wen bist du? German grammar, you see, does not allow the preposition and that interrogative pronoun wen to be distanced from each other. Now, English grammar does, in questions like, who are you for? And who are you talking about? The only grammatically allowable way to ask questions like this in German is to formulate them literally as, for whom are you? Für wen bist du? And about whom speak you? Über wen sprechen Sie? Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, what do you say we put this new grammar into practice with a few short dialogue exchanges? Alles klar? Oh, by the way, we're going to imagine that all of these exchanges are between us and the previously mentioned neighbor, with whom we use the familiar pronoun du. Ja? Gut. Here then is our first exchange. Do we ask, für wen arbeitest du? Or, wofür arbeitest du? Richtig. Für wen arbeitest du? As the neighbor's answer suggests, für meinen Onkel, the question here refers to a person, as in who do you work for? So our only option is to construct our question with the preposition für, followed by the interrogative pronoun wen. Here's our next dialogue snippet. We begin by asking, sollen wir durch den Park gehen? Now, does the neighbor respond with, wir gehen nicht durch ihn? Oder, wir gehen nicht dadurch? Genau. Because the preposition durch is used with an object, which here is der Park, the grammatically correct way to refer to this object, der Park, is with a da compound, dadurch. And that's all there is to it. We use da and wo compounds for objects, ideas, and places. But when we're referring to a person, we use a preposition followed by a personal pronoun or the interrogative pronoun wen. Schön. Und jetzt, meine Damen und Herren, the time has finally come. The time has come to take our German skills a level higher. So far in our journey, we've only been able to express ourselves in the present tense, die Gegenwartsform. But the time has come to change this. It's time that we learn how to describe events that have occurred in the past using die Vergangenheitsform called the present perfect. Auf Deutsch, das Perfekt. Now, don't be misled by the label present perfect. Many of my students get confused when I tell them that we're going to learn to describe events in the past using a tense called the present perfect. Because, well, obviously, this tense's name has the word present in it. For the time being, let's just ignore this problematic label. What's truly important, though, is that we understand the following. The present perfect is the most common way of expressing the past tense in spoken German. In fact, we can find a few instances of das Perfekt in Ralph and Mia's dialogue. For example, when Ralph asks his wife, woher hast du denn die Zeitung? Mia tells him, ich habe sie heute Morgen in der Bäckerei gekauft. She then follows this up by explaining to Ralph, dann habe ich die Zeitung gesehen und ich habe gesagt, heute möchte ich auch die Zeitung lesen. First, notice that each utterance in the present tense contains a conjugated form of the verb haben. Now, to be specific, the haben in these utterances is not the main verb, like it is in Ralph's initial question, woher hast du denn die Zeitung? The hast in this initial question can stand alone in the sense of having something, as in you have the newspaper. The conjugated forms of haben in the past tense utterances, though, cannot stand on their own. Instead, they're what we call a helping verb or auxiliary verb. And in fact, the helping verb is the first of two grammatical elements that we need to form the present perfect. As for the second grammatical element, let's take a look one more time at Mia's utterances in the present perfect. She tells Ralph, ich habe sie heute Morgen in der Bäckerei gekauft. And then she adds, dann habe ich die Zeitung gesehen und ich habe gesagt. The words gekauft, gesehen, and gesagt are what linguists call past participles. Past participles serve as the main verb in present perfect sentences. They express the past tense, and in German, they tend to come at the end of the sentence. Ich habe sie heute Morgen in der Bäckerei gekauft. Now, just as every German verb has an infinitive form, every German verb also has a past participle. And for the hundreds of regular verbs like kaufen, sagen, fragen, machen, spielen, arbeiten, reden, and regnen, the past participle is formed by following three steps. First, we drop the en from the infinitive form. Second, we add a ge prefix. And finally, we add a suffix, which for all regular verbs is either a t, or if the participle stem ends in a t, d, or n, we add an et. And voila, just like that, we have transformed our verbs into beautiful past participles. Gekauft, gesagt, gefragt, gemacht, gespielt, gearbeitet, geredet, geregnet. Now we can take our past tense constructions one step further. Without a subject and a helping verb, all these poor past participles are just hilflos. So let's help them out, shall we? Let's give each of them a helping verb and a subject. Ich habe gekauft. Du hast gesagt. Sie haben gefragt. Er hat gemacht. Sie hat gespielt. Wir haben gearbeitet. Ihr habt geredet. Es hat geregnet. Großartig. You see, meine Damen und Herren, the present perfect is not that difficult at all. Now let's talk a little bit more about word order. As we've seen, the past participle comes at the end of the sentence, while the helping verb comes in the second position. And so, using our handy WPM, which remember stands for Word Position Model, a basic utterance in the present perfect looks like this. Ich habe die Zeitung gekauft. Note that, in fact, this is the same word order that applies when we use a modal verb in a sentence. Ich will die Zeitung kaufen. So then, what happens when we have a sentence with more than just an object? For instance, what if we want to include information about when and where something happened? Well, in English, we could construct a sentence with these elements in any of the following ways. I bought the paper this morning at the bakery. I bought the paper at the bakery this morning. Or even, this morning, I bought the paper at the bakery. Now, while English allows for some flexibility in the word order, the German language tends to be a little less flexible. German sentences, you see, generally prefer that we put time before place. Remember that. We express time before place, TP. This is why Mia tells Ralph, Ich habe die Zeitung heute Morgen in der Bäckerei gekauft. The object, die Zeitung, comes first, followed by the time, heute Morgen, and then the place, in der Bäckerei. Another common word order that you'll hear, and which we've already learned in an earlier lesson, is to begin the sentence with the time element. And so, to use Mia's sentence once more, we would start with heute Morgen. Then we need to put in the auxiliary verb habe in the second position, followed in the third position by the subject, ich, then the object, die Zeitung, then the place, in der Bäckerei, and finally, in the fourth position, we give the past participle, gekauft. So Mia's sentence would now go, Heute Morgen habe ich die Zeitung in der Bäckerei gekauft. Got it? Now, it does take practice to get the hang of this. So don't forget to follow up this lesson with the grammar exercises in the course workbook. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, we can now express ourselves in the past tense with regular verbs. And by the way, in the German grammar tradition, which was established by Jakob Grimm in the early 19th century, regular verbs in German are also called weak verbs. And in the next lesson, I'll explain the reason behind this curious label. I mean, after all, how can a verb be weak? Naja, das erfahren wir in der nächsten Lektion. One thing that I will tell you, though, is that the vast majority of verbs in German are weak. Over 90% of them, according to most estimates. As for the other 10%, well, for those, we just have to memorize that they're not regular weak verbs. Take the following random set of verbs: stehlen, stellen, and helfen. Now, only one of them is weak. Can you tell which? The answer? Stellen. Its past participle is gestellt, as in, ich habe den Wein auf den Tisch gestellt. The other two verbs are irregular strong verbs, which we'll hear all about in our next lesson. Now, although we generally have to memorize that verbs like stellen and sagen are weak and regular, while other verbs like helfen and sehen are strong and irregular, there are two tricks that we can use for recognizing weak verbs. First, any verb that's clearly been borrowed from English is weak. These are verbs where basically speakers have taken the English word and stuck an en or n on the end of it to make it a German infinitive. For example, the German verbs sprinten, googeln, joggen, chatten, und mailen. To put borrowed verbs like these into the past tense, we drop the en or n from the infinitive, and we add two things: a t suffix and a ge prefix. For instance, we would say, ich habe meinen Namen gegoogelt, or wir haben das Dokument gemailt. Second, all infinitive verbs with the suffix of ieren, pronounced ieren, are weak. For example, aktualisieren, spekulieren, gratulieren. In fact, there are a lot of ieren verbs in German, and they are all weak, which means that their past participle has a T suffix. But, and we'll need to remember this but for later lessons as well, verbs with an ieren suffix do not take a GE prefix in their participle form. So if we wanted to say, for instance, I haven't updated my cell phone, in German this would be, ich habe mein Handy nicht aktualisiert. Almost all ieren verbs work this way in the present perfect. Spekulieren, ich habe spekuliert. Gratulieren, ich habe gratuliert. Linguistically, there's another pattern at work here, and which indicates to a speaker, do not put a GE prefix on this verb's past participle. And I think it's an important pattern that we foreign learners of German can use to our benefit, and which we can apply to other parts of German's grammar as well. It has to do with word stress, which linguists call prosody or intonation. Take a look again at the ieren verbs we just learned, and listen closely to which part of the verb gets the main stress. Aktualisieren, spekulieren, gratulieren. The stress falls on the second to last syllable, that is, the syllable with the IER. This is also where the stress remains in the past participle. Aktualisiert, spekuliert, gratuliert. Now, listen to where the stress falls in the regular verbs that we've seen in this lesson. Machen, arbeiten, reden. The stress here is on the first syllable, and as we've seen, these verbs do have a GE prefix in their past participle, and the main stress stays on that first syllable of that root verb. Gemacht, gearbeitet, geredet. So then, the prosodic pattern goes like this. If a verb is not stressed on the first syllable, its past participle does not take a GE prefix. And as we've seen, ieren verbs all fall into this category. Aktualisiert, spekuliert, gratuliert. Now, I just said all ieren verbs, but human languages have exceptions. And German, well, German is no exception. Take the verb verlieren. Verlieren is actually an irregular verb, and its past participle is verloren, and not verliert. Note, however, that verlieren still follows the prosodic pattern. It is not stressed on the first syllable, and so its past participle does not take a GE prefix. It's verloren and not geverloren. Now, if you're a language nerd like me and you're curious as to why verlieren bucks the trend of being a regular weak verb, the answer lies in knowing your etymology, that is, your word history. Turns out that verlieren is not a word that German borrowed from another language, as is the case with verbs like jonglieren, modernisieren, or qualifizieren, all of which are borrowed from French. And I'll let you in on something else. In her dialogue with Ralph, Mia actually uses one irregular verb. When she's explaining to Ralph what happened at the bakery, she says, Dann habe ich die Zeitung gesehen. The past participle here, gesehen, doesn't entirely follow the pattern that we just learned for the regular verbs. On the one hand, there's a GE prefix, but it doesn't take a T suffix. Instead, it ends in en. Irregular verbs like sehen and a host of others we're going to learn in our next lesson are traditionally called strong verbs. So then, meine Damen und Herren, sind Sie bereit? Are you ready to take on those bad boy strong verbs? Natürlich sind Sie das. Also dann, auf Wiedersehen und bis gleich.